all. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. Manningham City Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri people as the traditional custodians of the land we now know as Manningham. We pay our respects to the Wurundjeri elders past and present, and we value the ongoing contribution to the cultural heritage of Manningham. Manningham Council would also like to acknowledge the contribution made to Manningham over the years by people of diverse backgrounds and cultures. I welcome all members of the public here tonight to this council meeting who have come along to observe proceedings. I'd like to advise those present that tonight's meeting will be audio and video recorded. All care will be taken to maintain your privacy. However, as a visitor of the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. By remaining in the gallery, it is assumed your consent is given in the event that your voice and/or image is broadcast. All council meetings are controlled by a meeting procedure local law. I will introduce each item of business as listed on the agenda by calling it by number and by reading the title. I will then call for a mover and a seconder of the motion on the item before opening any debate. Only councillors are able to join the debate on an item. Councillors may adopt the officer's recommendation in the report or propose amendments or supplementary motions. I'd like to draw your attention to item 7 on tonight's agenda, public question time, which provides people with the opportunity to ask questions of the council. Questions must be registered prior to the commencement of the meeting to be asked. If we do not have the information at hand to provide a meaningful response, the question may be taken on notice and a response provided in writing. I would also stress that I will deal with a maximum of 2 questions per person and 2 questions on any one issue. If you have more than 2 questions, please submit these additional questions in writing to council through the normal channels. Item 2, apologies and requests for leaves of absence. There are no apologies. Item 3, prior notification of conflict of interest. There are no prior notifications of conflict of interest. Item 4, confirmation of the minutes. Can I have a mover? Councillor Climate.
That the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the council held on the 27th of November 2018 be confirmed.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Conlon. Would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Conlon, would you like to speak to the motion? I put the motion. All those in favour? Motion carried. Item number 5, presentations. There are no presentations. Item number 6, petitions. There are no petitions. Item number 7, public question time. There are some questions from Miss Knight. Miss Knight, would you like to come to the lectern and ask your questions? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I just want to address the parking restrictions in front of my house. I am representing the residents of the other 3 houses that have been affected. As well as only relevant answers pertaining to the attached petition, which was sent in May, can the Engineers Department explain also if the restrictions were to be continued down these houses, 70, 72, 74 and 76 Council Street, what was and is the problem for them that in the past these applications for this to happen was rejected? As the rules stand at the moment, only these 4 houses have to provide unrestricted parking for vehicles that do not require permits. That is unacceptable and quite discriminatory for these residents affected and obliged.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. I'll direct that question to the Director of Planning and Community? No. The Director of City Services, Mr Harrison. Mr Harrison?
Through you, Madam Mayor. I understand that officers have been surveying the area to see whether there is a parking problem, but I am not aware of what the results are of that survey. So I'll have to take the question on notice and get back to the
Right, so, Ms Knight, did you hear the answer? That the question's taken on notice and the council officers will get back to you about it.
But really that has not the answer that I'm asking.
But they will get back to you in writing and verbally.
Yep.
Mr Harrison? Thank you.
I want answers to this also, which I haven't been able to provide you with. It's not the matter of...
Right, so if that's your second question, is that a second question? Well, it has to be in writing.
The first one, why those properties in?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we'll just take it on notice and provide a response. Thanks. All right, I'll move to now item number 8, which is admissions of urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. Item number 9, the planning permit applications. 9.1, planning application PL 17/028012 at 584 to 588 Doncaster Road, 811, 813 Elgar Road and 3 Briar Court, Doncaster, for the use and development of the land for an 11-storey mixed-use building with associated basement parking comprising dwellings, food and drink premises, restricted retail premises, the removal of easements and the creation and alteration of access to a road in a road zone category 1. Do I have a mover? Councillor Haynes.
I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Galbally. Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. There are a number. This site has a lot of history. It's the old Volkswagen site. Prior to that, it was an Aldi site for the L. But what the developer has done over the years has bought some extra properties to be able to make this prominent site of a more high degree of interest and visual interest for the community. As this is a strategic site of the Doncaster Hill precinct, it has been, this particular application has been presented to Council over a very lengthy process since May 2016, Madam Mayor. And it has gone through many processes, including the Sustainable Design Task Force. And I'm very pleased to say that the contemporary high quality design of this is a mixed palette of external materials and with a large amount of glazing and also a timber look material. I'm from Westfield and everywhere else, it will definitely stand out. It won't have that clinical look that some of the white buildings are having. So I'm really pleased with the outcome of the look of this. As far as the design goes, there's a great internal amenity around courtyards within the building. It really is quite considerate of the amenity of the residents, and there are many other things I can talk about with this, but I would like to ask the fellow councillors to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Would the seconder like to speak?
No.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Councillor Chen.
I have a question about the forms, the blue forms. Can officer answer the question about clause 43.02, design and develop overlay under the management planning scheme that prescribe development under the headline form. Development must ensure the site area covered by the buildings does not exceed 60%. My question to the officer is that a mandatory requirement? And given that the current planning application, the site coverage is 75%, 15% more.
Thank you, Councillor Chen. I'll direct that question to Mr. Columbus.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, that provision of the planning scheme isn't a mandatory requirement, and in the report we do discuss that on balance, given the high quality of the development, that exceeding that requirement is satisfactory in this instance.
Thank you. Councillor Chen, would you like to also speak against the motion after your question? Or?
Yes, I personally have issues with the blue form. I mean, it is 61%, 65% is fine, but my concern is 75%, and I note that given that design is always subjective, and some will think that it is terrific, and some of the community will think that it's horrific. But so I personally is very concerned about the view form, and I think that it can be further reduced. And for that reason, I'm sorry I could not support it.
Are there any speakers for the motion? Are there any speakers against the motion? Councillor Zafiropoulos.
I do agree with the officers in terms of this being a very major development, and a lot of architectural skill has gone into it to make it as presentable as possible. However, I am worried about the precedents we create when we allow a number of requirements of compliance to be passed by sort of arguing in terms of architectural design, marks up for it and all this. Look, how can we allow the building complies a 6-storey form with a maximum height of 19.5 metres, exceeds the preferred DDOI height by 8.5 metres. I know it's only at the bottom part where the zoning changes, but still, such a huge 8.5 metres difference creates a bad precedent. Already, I do understand the rationale for the planning scheme trying to control development in certain parts of Manningham, and thus allowing other parts to not experience that disastrous development for some people. I'm using their words, not mine. But when you allow non-compliance of heights, non-compliance of setbacks, non-compliance of the 60% requirement that Councillor Chen mentioned, and then what we're doing, I've noticed it even in this application, we're saying that we have had similar things and we've made exemptions, and therefore we'll use this later on for another application to say, well, if we allow that particular application to go with such non-compliance, then we can do the same for any future one. So I'm worried about the message we are sending out to the residents, particularly those who are concerned about the overdevelopment.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further speakers for the motion? Would the mover like to speak? Would like to?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question to the officers.
You summing up.
Okay, so my question was going to be, I mean, it doesn't set a precedence based on the compliance issue. Okay, so fellow councillors, I would like you to consider this application, and I urge you to support the officer's recommendation. It is not setting a precedence for that area and for the Doncaster Hill area, as for many of the buildings on the Doncaster Hill have had higher density developments, and unfortunately there has already been a precedent set. This is compliant, except for, as my fellow councillor Mike Zafiropoulos has said, there is an area of where the Briar Court interface is. That interface has been discussed at length on the south side, and it has said, as you would read within the report, that it's an appropriate interface for the south zone, And as we know, that is an area designated for higher, more intense built form. So I ask and urge my fellow councillors to support this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. I'll put the motion now. All those in favour? All those against? Motion carried.
Division, please.
Division. All those in favour, please stand. Councillor Goff, Councillor Coleman, Councillor Haynes, Councillor McLeish, Councillor Kleinert, Councillor Galbally and Councillor Piccinini. All those against? Councillor Chen and Councillor Zafiropoulos. Thank you. Item 9.2. Planning permit application PLN 18/0336 at 107 to 111 Anderson Creek Road, Doncaster East, for buildings and works for the construction of 52 independent living units associated with the existing retirement village. Do I have a mover? Councillor McLeish.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Zafiropoulos. Thank you. Would the mover like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to rise to support this particular application. This is an application by Batcare. The proposal that we have before us is a new planning permit. It's a planning permit to replace an earlier planning permit for this particular site. Those of you familiar with the site know this is a very large development. It was to be completed in 3 stages. Stage 1 is now complete, stage 2 has commenced, and this reconcedes stage 3. Stage 3 previously has a permit for 3 4-storey apartment buildings, for a retirement complex, 94 apartments. This particular permit application reimagines that proposal and instead proposes building 18 independent living units, predominantly 2-storey buildings. 52 units will be constructed with intervening roadways and walkways. As far as I'm concerned, it's quite a reasonable proposal that actually will be more in keeping with the neighbouring context of the residential properties which border this particular area of the site, because it is the western interface that this particular development will be. And even so, we're only ending up with a site coverage of 38%, which is a fairly low site coverage for a fairly significant site. The proponent is proposing to build 83 car parking spaces. They're only required to build 69, but they're putting in 83. They're putting in 14 visitor car parks. And I think that is just one element of the proposal which gives you some sense of the social contract that this particular developer believes they have with the community and the users of the site, because they're trying to take care of what they know will be the demand for their site. So I've looked quite extensively through this proposal. I've seen it a number of times in the past as it's gone through the process, and I'm very comfortable to lend my support to the proposal and ask my fellow councillors to vote accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor McLeish. Would the seconder like to speak?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I'm also very pleased with this proposal. It's quite refreshing for applications to not only comply but go beyond and be generous about and understand the congestion, the limited parking and so on, and to provide more than they require in terms of parking. They've also been very generous in the way they designed the units. They've allowed 130 square meters to 200 square meters per unit, and that is quite generous in my view, and it does recognise the need for our elderly to be treated with dignity and not to be put in boxes. The other thing that this does is that it ticks all the boxes. It's consistent with council's sustainability. It ticks the box about the 20-minute neighbourhoods and lots of other things. It does have a couple of things which are not quite positive. This design things, and they predominantly result from the slope of the land. But overall, this is quite in contrast with the previous application, so I'm very much supportive of it.
Thank you. Are there any speakers against the motion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Item 10, City Planning and Community, 10.1, Amendment C104, Westfield Doncaster Future Plans and Proposed Development Plan, consideration of panel and advisory committee report. Do I have a mover?
Moved as on the paper, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Goff. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Haynes. Would the mover like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And this particular C104 amendment is something that has been changing, but a long time in the making here with Westfield. This is, I suppose, integral to the Westfield development plan that we've approved and looked at Doncaster at Manningham here, which talks about an expansion of Westfield, and also it looks at entering, I suppose, into that zone. I think it's zone 4 of the Doncaster Hill, or area 4, a couple of other roads, Westfield Drive and Grosvenor Street, I think are being adopted into this particular area for that plan and consideration. There are quite a number of things with this, but basically this document, this motion, is a report on the findings of the panel. It's been to a panel hearing. It's actually had people that have actually worked on that. We've got the reports back, we've got the findings, and that process in itself had quite a lot of consultation going back over the years. So there's been quite a few occasions where the community and the owners of the property have been in consultation and given their ability to present and use it to present to the panel. Now, we actually are writing a response at Manningham. Our officers have written a response to some of those things, and there are a couple of minor changes that we're sort of wanting to adopt here in it. That's what we're sending off to the Minister. And after that, that will, I think, enact then the Westfield expansion. And indeed, it is going to be a change there. There's going to be more density within Westfield. It also talks about a new tower, I suppose, and gateway site into the city in the northeast corner of the site, and it's all to do with a whole lot of other things here with that plan with regard to closing road and redirecting traffic around Westfield, all of which we've discussed and approved here at Council before. So this is the process, and that's off to the Minister, and hopefully whoever the Minister is, I don't know.
Richard Wynne.
Yeah, Richard Wynne.
It is still Richard, is it? All right, fine. So councillors, I think we should endorse this.
Thank you, Councillor Goff. Would the seconder like to speak?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one thing to add, as Councillor Goff has stated, this is a panel report. Now, the panel report on the 24th of October on page 34 has some really good points to do with Southern Point Court, which is obviously facing Westfield. And the residents there engaged with the panel quite well. And the panel agreed that the Southern Point Court would be classified as a lower order road and accepts Mr Dunstan's assessment. And it goes on to say a few other things about it, but it also states the proposed keep clear line markings across all of Williamson's Road northbound traffic lanes is supported, and the concept layout should be updated to reflect this change. The panel acknowledges that Vic Road's approval will ultimately be required for this line marking to be installed. And there was a few other things there to do with this. And in conclusion, the panel concluded, keep clear line marking should be installed on all northbound Williamson's Road traffic lanes to enhance opportunities for drivers exiting Southern Point Court. And there are many cars that live within that area. So I'm hoping that we as a council are continuing to emphasise that part of the panel report and get the best outcome for our residents with that keep clear sign and all of the other things that council. I'm looking forward to the outcome for the best that we can get for our area and a bigger Westfield for the shoppers. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any speakers against the motion? Will there any other speakers like to speak to the motion? Councillor McLeish.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to speak in favour of this particular proposition, Madam Mayor. It has, as been said, been a very long and detailed process because this particular amendment had to effectively restart because the size of the site was extended at one point. I was quite pleased to note that in the panel report on page 213 of the agenda, you can see a list of the recommended changes that covers 1.5 pages, just. And that tells you something. It tells you that the documentation has been developed by both the developer and in conjunction with the council for this amendment were very thoroughly prepared. They were well considered, and the panel was able to see that in the documentation that was provided and understand that what's being proposed is a balanced outcome that achieves the improvements needed in the shopping centre and the expansion desired by its owner, and any owner is entitled to propose an extension or expansion of their facility within their land, and that it's been done in a balanced way and that the community objectives are being delivered. So I think it's quite a good outcome for our city. We're going to see a substantial growth in the size of this centre, a substantial growth in employment, and an even more substantial growth in the amount of car parking. Because one of the changes that the council insisted on happening when this proposal was first put forward was that there was actually a flat-out increase in parking in this centre. When this development is complete, there will be 7,575 car parking spaces in the centre, which is quite a marked uplift on the current parking rates at that centre. And anyone who's been there during the busy periods knows that there are times of the year when those extra car parking spaces will be desperately needed. The panel also agreed with many of the traffic improvements that have been proposed, most importantly to make sure that the bus interchange is separated from motor car traffic into the centre. And that in itself will be a significant improvement to public transport into the centre. Building an all-weather public bus interchange will also be a great improvement, and hopefully I believe that will result in many more people using public transport to and from this centre. So I recommend the proposal to the Chamber.
Thank you, Councillor McLeish. Are there any other speakers? Accordingly, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 10.2, the Waldo Precinct Draft Master Plan. Do I have a mover? Councillor Chen.
Madam Mayor, I move that the alternative motion be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Haynes. Would the mover like to speak?
Yes, Madam Mayor. The draft master plan is to establish a Waldo precinct as a regional recreation and tourism destination. It comprises parts of Rice Reserve and Rocky Lake Park, and it will include a cafe in Rocky Lake Park, Science Museum, relocation of Kevin Hines Grove, redevelopment of the Rice Pavilion, and upgrade of the Victoria Street play space. Public consultation will commence at the end of January next year. The master plan is endorsed by Council tonight. There are 2 points in my alternative motion. Firstly, it is not clear whether a cafe in Rocky Lake Park will be part of the public consultation. We all know that in Council's mission statement, we pledge to listen, consult, and act with integrity, value, and transparency. And given the strong community protests in the past against a cafe in Rocky Lake Park, it is important to be very clear to our community that if the idea of cafe is endorsed by Council tonight, in the final Waldo Precinct Master Plan, a concept cafe design will be worked up and be subject to further community consultation. Advocating for a signalized pedestrian crossing on Victoria Street to provide safe access between Rocky Lake Park and Rice Reserve. Connecting paths is proposed to be included to improve the safety access. So I hope my fellow councillors could support the alternative motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chen. Would the seconder like to speak? Are there any speakers against the motion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Motion carried. Eight 8.3, the draft parking permit policy 2019. Do I have a mover? Councillor Conlon.
I move the recommendation be adopted.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jett. Would the mover like to speak?
Thank you. And this is 10.3, obviously. The draft parking permit policy. We wouldn't normally review policies in such a frequent rate, given that this was only just over a year old. But given the fantastic work that our Citizens Connect team have done, we're able to have electronically issued parking permits, I think, is the intention. So that means that the permits will now only be valid for 1 year as a result of that, which is going to be great for people struggling with parking. Because if you've got it for 3 years and you've moved out, then they're just sort of sitting there and they could be being used inappropriately. The other changes that are coming up is the introduction of the 12 months. Apart from that 12 months term, is the prohibition of the availability of residential parking permits for developments of more than 5 dwellings, or 5 or more, after the adoption of this review policy and existing developments consisting of 10 or more dwellings. And that again will be a good thing for people who need to find parks around our busy streets. So I recommend this parking policy and hope that we can keep reviewing these sort of policies that are clearly hot issues and need refinement as we go on a continuous basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would the seconder like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Permits, this is an important issue, Madam Mayor. These permits are a result, and it has to be said, are a result of higher density development within Manningham. We've picked the areas around Manningham that we need to have higher development, and these parking permits are a response protecting the amenity of the people who live a little bit further away from those developments, from their streets being totally parked out by people living in high-rise buildings in and around Doncaster Road. And it's become essential that we've done this. Now, original parking permits started a number of years ago, and I remember when they came out, it was really around our shopping centres, and we had issues with parking around in neighbourhood streets around shopping centres, and it becomes restrictions and permits were introduced in and around there. Another area where we have great demand on parking in private streets is around where people are leaving their cars to catch public transport into the city. And indeed, if you travel around the major busways of Manningham on those roads, you will find that there's a lot of parking there, so permits and restrictions have gone in there. And again, where we've got these high-road buildings in Doncaster, a response with the parking is there are parking spots within those buildings, but there aren't the other parking spots around available for those greater developments into the future. Right? So that is why we're needing to adopt and sort of fine-tune this policy. And this isn't adopting, it's actually just putting it out for public consultation, and this will come back to us after that in the new year. So, councillors, we need to really get it part of the process that we need to adopt it.
Thank you, Councillor Goff. Are there any speakers against the motion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 10.4, consideration of the draft 2018 Community Grants Policy. Do I have a speaker? Councillor Zafiropoulos.
I move the recommendation be adopted.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Conlon. Would the mover like to speak?
Yes. Council has got an approach of continuous improvement in all of its policies, programs, procedures and so on. And as part of that continuous improvement, the community grants program has been reviewed with the aim of simplifying it and streamlining it, particularly with the new priorities we have set in our council plan and in other ways. So the program basically supports community organisations in the not-for-profit sector in order for them to be able to deliver services, particularly to the disadvantaged. There are 4 categories. The community partnership grants, which had 12 recipients, about just over $1.4 million, and 3 other smaller categories. The community development grants are around about $110,000. We had 14 recipients there. The arts and culture grants, 14 applications at about $100,000. And lastly, the small grants at $100,000, and we had 53 grants there. Basically, the major category, which is the community partnerships grants, has been now categorized into 3 groups. The first group is the Wellbeing and Community Support Services, and that has been allocated approximately $405,000. Manningham Learns Alliance, which has been allocated $290,000, and the Cultural Development Engagement Program, which has been assigned $69,000. The program is a very worthwhile program, and reviewing it and making it simpler for those who make applications. And we do know that sometimes, particularly the smaller groups, for them to be able to make an application takes a lot of expertise that some of them may not have. So I'm very pleased that we've simplified the process. The amount of money we are going to give next year will remain the same, but the impact will be much greater.
Thank you, Councillor. Would the seconder like to speak?
Yes, I would. I'm not particularly speaking in support of this policy per se, but just I'd like to flag, in regards to those amounts that Councillor Zafiropoulos mentioned, is that is not part of the policy, and it's not part of what we're approving tonight, because what we will be doing at some point is, through the budget process, is considering the allocation of each of those streams. So this is about splitting the community partnerships grant into 3 streams, and I've got no issue with that, which is why I've seconded this motion. It's also to endorse the policy, the draft policy. The reason I'm discussing this is because, in my mind, the flagged allocation of those funds for those 3 streams, I don't believe is appropriate, and I don't believe there is enough money within this program to do everything that we should be doing within Manningham. I'd like to point out Vantage Point Church, who currently provides food security for 480 people throughout Manningham and the surrounding areas. And they do all that without virtually any support from us. They do that fortnight in, fortnight out. And it's not just about providing food for those people, it's about reducing their social isolation. They've also got plans to do a women's retreat to help empower women who find themselves in difficult situations, and they're also looking at a new program to help seniors who find themselves socially isolated.
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Goff.
This is diverging from the topic somewhat too much, and we're here to debate this particular topic, and if we want to debate other organisations and other things that should be done, so relevance to the actual motion.
I uphold that. So, Councillor Conlon, you are straying to matters which are not pertinent to the motion, so if you could...
Well, it is pertinent in my mind because of the I'm just flagging that these amounts are not what we're approving.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm flagging, from my point of view, it's not enough. Because in the report, it talks about subject to...
That's fine, Councillor Conlon. I think it was in relation to the matters of other charities and other organisations who may apply. That's something that's not directly relevant and straying into irrelevance from this particular motion, but what you're saying there is relevant.
Thank you. So, subject to budget considerations, it proposed that Council's overall commitment to funding community services through the provision of grants and other service agreements is retained at the same levels. That's the point, that it's in this report, but we're not approving that because we're approving other things. I just want to clarify that, and on the basis that, in my mind, there is not sufficient money in that revised allocation.
Thank you, Councillor Conlon. Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any other speakers for the motion? Yes. Councillor Galbally.
Yes, I would just like to bring us back to the actual motion, which is really what we're endorsing, and I'll read it from here, is the revision of the community partnership structure, including the 3 new CPG streams in the grant policy and grant guidelines. We are not particularly approving levels, because as Councillor Goff said, that becomes part of the budget process, and each application for grants, I'm sure, goes through normal channels, and any group is welcome to come and put an application in. So basically, this is what we're talking about tonight, and this is what we're asking everyone to approve.
Thank you, Councillor Galbally. Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any speakers who'd like to speak to the motion? Yes, Councillor Haynes.
So I'd like to, I understand Councillor Conlon's point, and I support this motion, but I also think the budget process that he has already flagged, hopefully we will deal with the lack of funds and the inadequacies of the equity throughout that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. As there's no further speakers, no, Councillor Zafiropoulos.
Look, I'm happy to accept what Councillor Conlon is saying. The only reason I mention the figures is because in the current sort of set of what we know about the budget, this is what is being proposed. There are, as I said, these are estimates. However, what we...
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Goff.
Are we going to have... We haven't had a speaker against the motion.
We haven't, you're correct.
So there's no sign.
Thank you.
I knew it.
All right, accordingly, I will put the motion. All those in favour? Motion carried unanimously. Right. Item 11, City Services. There are no reports. Item 12, Shared Services. There are no reports. Oh yes, there is one. 12.1, the 2018-19 mid-year budget review. Do I have a mover? Councillor Zafiropoulos.
I move the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McLeish. Would the mover like to speak?
Yes, just this is another welcome report, because the mid-year budget review has come up with positive outcomes for council, and basically what this report is recommending is that we incorporate now this new forecasts into the financial systems in order for the reports to be more accurate than if we hadn't. If I can go through some of the key financial indicators in relation to the operating surplus, we've got $1.1 million positive, an increase there, and this is based by, on the fact that an external source has given us $1.2 million for the solar panels at Malvern Stadium. We also had a net gain in asset sales of $0.6 millions, and that was in relation to the sale of the 383 Mangham Road, Doncaster. And we had an increase in operating expenses of 0.07, resulting in $1.1 million increase. The capital expenditure was also good. We've got $3.7 million forecast, more than we had anticipated. I won't go into the reasons for that. Cash investments has also increased by $4.4 million. And importantly, our net assets have gone up by $121 million because of the revaluation of property and infrastructure assets. Sorry?
I've just gone down the last one.
Have they? Okay, they fluctuate, but at this stage, they look pretty positive.
Thank you, Councillor Zafiropoulos. Would the seconder like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to speak in favour of this particular report. I'm not going to go through a whole list of numbers on this report because it speaks for itself. It tells us that the financial forecasting the officers have been doing has been very accurate, and that there are little adjustments being made based on the subtle variations of additional income streams and rescheduling a few items. So it's quite a worthwhile report. But I will draw councillors' attention to page 500 of the agenda, page 5 of the report, materials and contracts, and there's a bullet point in there which you might miss. Waste and recycling disposal expenses are forecast to increase by $320,000 following China's ban on recycling imports. Now this increase has been funded partly because the state government has given us some relief funding of $102,000. And we're very, very grateful for that relief funding. I'm sure councils all over Victoria are grateful for the relief funding. But the challenge still exists, councillors, because there is a shortfall there of $228,000 just for the current financial year. It will be more next year because of e-waste bans and other things. We have one of our councillors very heavily involved in working on waste issues for our council and for the region, in fact for the state, because of their engagement in one of the waste forums and chairmanship of one of the waste forums. The challenge we have as a council, as every council in Victoria has, is we are losing money here. This is costing our community money because of the problems with waste recycling. It's going to cost us money for every year for the next decade. We need some strategic solutions in place, and we need the continued support of the state government to execute those strategic solutions. It isn't just about a limited amount of financial support, it's about executing solutions. So hopefully the state government will continue to work closely with the council forums that are trying to get some solutions here and assist us and all the other 78 councils in Victoria to get some financial support to put in place the infrastructure to address these issues.
Thank you, Councillor McLeish. Are there any speakers against the motion? Accordingly, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 13.2, documents for sealing. Do I have a mover? Councillor McLeish. Councillor Climate.
That the recommendation be adopted.
Oh, sorry. I've already crossed it out. I actually, it was 13.1, which was the review of instruments and delegation for council to members of staff. I skipped an item, so because I'd already crossed it out in my enthusiasm. Thank you. So thank you, Councillor Climate, for passing motion 13.1. And do I have a seconder?
No need to probably yeah, you might need to start again.
I will,
At 13.1.
should I start again? Okay. 13.1, review of instruments of delegation from council to members of staff. Do I have a mover? Councillor Climate. Thank you.
That's so red.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Galbally, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Galbally, would you like to speak?
No.
Accordingly, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Motion carried. 13.2, documents for sealing. Do I have a mover? Councillor Haynes.
I move that the recommendation be adopted and nothing added.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Climate. Would the mover like to speak?
No, it's
Would
nothing
the
bad.
seconder like to speak? Accordingly, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 14, urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. Item 15, councillors' question time. Do I have any questions? Councillor Galbally.
Yes, Madam Mayor, it is with sadness that I'd like to inform Council that of the recent passing of Ray Lord. Ray was an active member of Manningham community with a focus on building stronger partnerships between business and the community. Ray was a founding member of his local Bendigo Bank and instrumental in the development of Manningham Business Excellence Awards. Our deepest sympathies are extended to Ray's wife Jean and his family at this very difficult time. I and Councillor Michelle, when we first were elected into Council 6 years ago, first met Ray at a function just upstairs, and it was the AGM for the Manningham Community Health. He was a warm and loving and caring fellow, jokingly told us how smiley and cheerful we were for councillors. And he challenged us to remain as smiling in a year's time. We were still smiling and enjoying our role as councillors, but not so much just because we were incessant smilers, but primarily because people like Ray Lord, who are the real backbone of our community, keep us that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galbally. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I do.
Councillor Chen.
Madam Mayor, Council recently held a very successful briefing session with Bowling Park sporting clubs and regarding North East Link impact. And I have since received some feedback from bowling businesses, and mainly there are over 100 businesses which may be subject to compulsory acquisition, and some of which have been established for over 30 years, and the business are their livelihood. And one of the business owner wrote and asked council, which I quote, to communicate. She asked council to communicate directly with us actively and openly so that we can feel supported and understand what our council is doing on our behalf during this time, unquote. And could the same briefing session or forum extended to our bowling business? And what is our plan and process to better engage with the affected parties, especially our business? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chen. I'll direct that question to the Director for Planning and Community, Mr. Corombos.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, the council officers are in the process at the moment of developing a draft advocacy strategy that we'll present to council early in the new year for consideration. And as part of that advocacy strategy, we'll certainly be considering options to hold a forum as suggested by Councillor Chen. We would also be looking at possibly doing something a little bit different to what we did with the sporting clubs, given that the land that's affected in the Bulleen Industrial Precinct is proposed to be compulsory acquired. Therefore, NELA's participation will be critical in any future engagement and consultation. So we'll aim to work with NELA on any future forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corombos.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question
Yes.
just on that question. I wasn't going to have a question.
Councillor Goff.
Considering that NELA is the authority that is building this, from the state government, the authority building the road, we are a council, but what is our role in those negotiations with private individuals? What's council's role?
I'll put that question to Mr. Corombos.
Through you again, Madam Mayor. Look, it's a good question. I suppose that's why we're in the process at the moment of looking at an advocacy strategy and actually determining what our recommendation to council will be in terms of what our role should be for that.
So my question is, do we play any part of the outcome other than advocacy?
No, we don't.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. Accordingly, I'll move to item number 16, which is confidential reports. Do I have a mover? Councillor Galbally.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move that council close the meeting to the public pursuant to section 89 2D of the Local Government Act 1989 to consider item 16.1 and item 16.2 concerning contractual matters.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goff. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Motion carried.